Hi, everyone. I am really happy to be here to help moderate the UCC update panel. My name is Amelia Brable, and I'm a business development manager at AVI SPL. So I'm excited to be here with a couple of these great guests, Shuli and Paul. And I guess as we get started, if you two could both introduce yourself, and yeah, we'd love to hear more about you to just get started today.
Sure. So I'll start. I'm Shuli Forte, Workplace Technology Director at WTW, responsible for mainly the meeting space technology, as well as global print and any other technology that a colleague really interfaces with when they're in the office. So I work with the business to learn about what the requests are and then work with our engineers to design the solutions that will give them the best experience.
Hello, and I'm Paul Wells with CCS Presentation Systems here in Arizona. And, we're a full service audiovisual integrator. So I help my customers, with meeting space technology, training room technology, making sure that they can have a great video conference experience.
Yeah, and Paul, you were already in one panel today, so thank you for coming back for your second panel. This is my first time hosting a panel. I've been a guest on here before, so I just wanted to invite the audience members, if you have questions for us in the chat, please add them. Otherwise, we'll just keep this pretty collaborative and casual and, just talk through some things that we're seeing and hearing and learning about. I think as Steph mentioned earlier, the things in UCC are just changing at such a rapid pace that even every 6 months isn't really enough to do its service in terms of where everything has gone and is continuing to go, and as you look across the entire stack. So I wanted to start off, just kind of looking at how we use UCC in our day-to-day lives. And I think this has changed for many of us, especially in the last few years. I don't like to use the word COVID, even though I think that obviously that drove a lot of change, but I feel all this change would have happened anyway. It was just accelerated by people starting to work a little bit differently. But really between conferencing, messaging, video, all these different pieces of the platform, we've all gotten used to using this full stack of UCC solutions. And curious to hear from you guys, how do you effectively manage these different communication overload potential for all the different things that are getting thrown at you, and how do you manage the collaboration fatigue that you may deal with throughout your own day? So Shuli, go ahead and start with you, since you've not been on a panel. I'll let Paul breathe for a moment here. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you in terms of how you're dealing with this in your day-to-day role, just as a user.
It's a great question. I have to be honest and say that desk phones and voicemail really are not that prevalent where I work now, from the different technologies that we have. Most colleagues really communicate via email and Teams, and IMs. But one of the features of these platforms is the ability to set your presence, particularly the do not disturb setting when you're, really busy, need to take a breather, need to focus on something. So that's one thing that I like to use. And then also, know how many, the corporate or personal mobile devices that can get, email and IMs and calls. It's knowing when to put it down and really just, take that breather when you need it. Like platforms like Office 365 and everything being in the cloud has made it a lot easier to ensure that everything's in sync. So, for me, that's really what it is. And then there are those tools that you have, like we're a Microsoft shop, so you have the, the different tools that let you kind of plan your day out accordingly, and maybe blocking out some time where it's just that me time to kind of, take a break and not really get inundated. So that's my take on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I do like that idea about setting your presence. But I after 4 o'clock or whatever, or 5 o'clock, I stop looking at as much as I can. And, if I get Teams messages or emails, whatever, I try to ignore that until I'm back working the next day, and on the weekends, obviously. But I also, do a lot of work on just trying to make sure that I control what I can control, as far as even if I see messages that come in that are stressful or cause anxiety, try not to worry about it until I have to, and then just one small step at a time.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that can be so hard, especially because people have now gotten sort of used to working at all times because we're all on different time zones or just working different types of hours. And, yes, of course, there are ways that you can schedule messages, but sometimes that may or may not always make sense. So I think a lot of us have had to learn to manage that internally for whatever, however that works for us and for what we do, and whether that's, just turning off your notifications or going on vacation and deleting an app because
yeah.
it'll come back, you can always bring it back. Or I don't know, a lot of times for me, I go on vacation to mountain areas, so I don't have good service anyway, so that's not
Hmm.
really a problem. But yeah, there's so many different ways.
One thing I've seen used actually, which is kind of nice, is people put a little disclaimer under their signature to say, I respect your time zone. It doesn't mean that you have to reply right away, which is actually a good thing too, just to let people know, hey, it's okay. You don't have to answer right now. We'll connect when you're available.
I've also really liked, and I've implemented it, is doing the vacation alerts. So giving people a heads up before you go on vacation so that they can get as much as they need from you before that time. You know what I'm like? Because it also gives them a way to know that you're going to be gone, and then um, instead of getting the out of office after they've sent an emergency message. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah,
And there's also
yeah.
delegating to your team members if you have team members to work with.
Mm.
Also, just letting people know in your out of office message who to reach out to when you're not there. Yep.
Yeah, and it's
Good point,
definitely
Paul.
hard because you also have to think about what mode of collaboration you're using and how that, it kind of used to just be, you know, phone or email, or now and there you've got various messaging platforms. Some of us use more than one, and we have people reaching us in many different ways, and being able to manage all that. And I think that continues to be a challenge, and especially as we start to see a lot of this going into the cloud, it gets a little bit more unified. As we say, unified communication. I think we're starting to see that more and more for sure. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of different ways that we all have to cope with it. How about in terms of the clients that you deal with? Have you worked with them at all in terms of understanding how we can help them, or how you can help them in your roles to better manage their collaboration?
For me, it's really working with the business, right? So, we have a lot of great ways of communicating upcoming changes and things like that. We have a digital champions network where we work with the business who have people who are willing to work with us to, kind of get new messages across to the teams. And, we use our intranet site pretty regularly to put, new ways of working up there and all the tools that are available, with Viva Engage, Viva Insights, and all those things that Microsoft has, for example, for tips and tricks of how to, spend your time the most optimal way. So definitely working with the adoption team to get things like that out to our
Yeah,
customers.
and then for me, it's really trying to make, if they do have a platform, they're a Microsoft house, trying to make the conference rooms work in the same way, join a meeting the same way that they joined it at their desk. Um, and that can be complicated, but that is definitely the best case scenario, is get a customer to standardize on something, and then we can make that use case in the room the same as at their desk, and then there's not a learning curve in every room that you walk into.
It's
Yeah,
so
Paul,
funny that,
Paul, you had mentioned in an earlier panel, pretty much every meeting having some component of remote participation. And I think that's the world we live in today. Even if it doesn't always, you've always got to kind of account for that, because somebody could either just be in a different city or not able to be in that physical space. And so, yeah, I mean, that kind of leads me into my next question is, user experience is becoming obviously more and more critical because of how we're, really trying to maximize our time and get the most out of our meetings. But what role do you guys see user experience playing in driving adoption and being able to, Sheila, you mentioned working with your customers working with your business partners within your organization to, maximize the effectiveness of these various platforms for UCC. So can you share some successes that you've had in this area, and share some challenges as well?
Yeah, so I mean, let's start. It kind of meshes together the exact use case that I'll share here. So before the pandemic, everything was Skype based, and users were used to coming into the meeting rooms to have their meetings, and it was all really well, put together. They would come in, the meeting would be already on the screen. They just hit the join button, one touch join, real nice and easy. But then once the pandemic happened, we had to kind of scramble to move everything to Teams from Skype, and a lot of our legacy, now called legacy video conferencing systems, didn't have the capability to connect to Teams meetings. So now we're hit with this issue where after the pandemic, people are starting to come back into the offices and coming into the meeting spaces, expecting to be able to have the same, functionality. I just come in there, I have a join button, and obviously that wasn't there. So we had to come up with some workaround solutions, using CVI solutions that were available at the time. But unfortunately, what that did was it caused, how on Teams you have the Brady Bunch or gallery view, available to you. That wasn't available on those legacy video conferencing systems. They would just see the active speaker on the screen. So we came up with this workaround solution where, okay, why don't we just use the laptop to, share the Teams view on the screen, but still use the room's, microphone and speakers so that they still get that full room experience, but then also see the Teams, gallery view on the screen. And that actually ended up evolving into becoming kind of a new standard with by using these all-in-one bars that a lot of the OEMs provide, where you have the video, the camera, and the speakers and the mics all built into the device already. So if you just connect that to a Docker, for example, that has a USB-C cable on it, then they just bring their laptop in the room and the laptop drives the meeting. And as Paul was alluding to earlier, you want people to have the same experience now when they're joining a meeting from their desk or from a meeting room. And that's one of the easiest way to do it, is just to have that simple plug and play experience. So, so that user experience has really been something that I think helped us to give a positive message and a positive feel for using technology in the office, because there was a little while there where people were like, why should I come into the office when I can't get the same experience on Teams that I'm getting at home? When, if I don't get it in the office, why should I come in? So being able to, give them this same look and feel has helped to encourage more people to come in and use the technology. So yes, user experience is really important.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that a little bit, it's great when you can have an organization that can standardize, but then you also have to account for those Zoom meetings, even though you're a Teams house, and then you have a client that sends you a Zoom meeting. Can your room even join that? And right now, Microsoft and Zoom are still, they're not all the way there on collaborating on that. So now, is it a different user experience to join a Zoom meeting in that space? Can you even join a Zoom meeting? Those are things that we have to, as integrators, talk through with the clients, manage expectations, and then kind of figure out what functionality they do want. And then once you do implement something, making sure that you're able to train enough people so that they can train within the organization, so that people can trust that when they book a meeting in a space, they know how to go in there, use it, and trust that it's going to work, right? Because if the user goes in there, has a bad experience, they may not want to do it again. And then, then they send emails saying that this equipment's garbage and, this and that, and then, how the spiral goes from there. So it's definitely a matter of, understanding what the user interaction they want it to be, getting it there, training on it, and then creating that trust so that people have a good experience with the technology.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
definitely both technical and human-centric kind of challenges going on here, right? Because obviously there are some, technically using different platforms and the like, but then there's also, like Paul, you mentioned, really being able to dig in up front as to what the expectations of the user are. And, sometimes you really have to trade off flexibility for ease of use, right? Or the other way around. And that may work better for some organizations than for others, right? So if you have a highly technical user, they may be perfectly happy with all the flexibility in the world because they know that they're going to be able to make their meeting work. But you also might have a scenario where you have a less technical user. And the most critical thing is that they can get in there and get that meeting going and have an absolutely positive experience. And they're probably going to use one platform 95% of the time. And so, yeah, those are all, I think, some of our biggest challenges, especially on the integration side, as we're talking to our customers, is, really making sure we're having those conversations and, understanding the expectations earlier rather than later, right? Because it can be a little challenging depending on what different types of meeting platforms. And we're certainly moving very far along with interoperability in general and being able to, handle various different types of meetings within the same room. But it's definitely something that I think we'll still be talking about in the next 6 months and probably longer, because it's just such a real problem. Because even within an organization, they have different meeting standards, different platforms for different use cases. And you might find out that most of the organization uses one platform, but then the C-level executives use something else, or for events, they use something else. And so, yeah, it can definitely continue to be an area where, we can add value as experts in the space and really be able to kind of walk through, what some of those challenges might be.
Absolutely. And that's why BYOD is so powerful, though, because, your laptop is already running all of the different platforms, right? Your laptop is that one driver for almost every use case. So being able to just bring that into the room does help to keep that diversity in meeting platforms. And also equally important is having a very robust support system. Like your colleagues need to know who to reach out to when there's an issue, and just to keep that whole side of it as streamlined and, well planned out as possible to reduce delays in getting the support that they need.
Definitely. So I feel like at this stage, we would be remiss in a conversation like this not to talk about artificial intelligence, because obviously it's something that has been prevalent in probably more areas than people really think through. I think the reality is it's been in place for quite some time in UCC, and maybe we just haven't always, noticed it. But it's definitely something that our customers are asking about, users are asking about, we're learning about. Obviously it's in the news all the time in different areas and different use cases. Paul, again, you mentioned in a different panel you had been interested in a lot of the camera tracking technology. Can you share a little bit more about your experience with that, or any other type of impactful AI technology that you've been encountering within your world?
Yeah, so I can't say that I've experienced it yet, but I'm hearing it's coming with some of the camera technology, and really, like I mentioned in that last panel, is getting the best view of whoever's speaking. And I think that's where AI is going to really make a conference space with multiple cameras, multiple microphones, really powerful, is getting that best view of whoever's speaking, whether they're facing one way or another, that the cameras and the technology and the software behind the cameras is going to be able to switch and get that best view of the person, so the people on the far side can get the best experience.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's always interesting with a lot of these is it's not so much about the experience for the people in the room as much as it is impacting the experience for the remote participant. Because, as we all know, most of us have been remote participants in meetings, and it's, not always the greatest experience, let's be honest. And I'm really excited to see what a lot of this has done and will continue to do to drive that experience forward. I know personally, I was, many years ago, probably a dozen years ago, I was like the sole remote participant in it was an audio conference call back then. And it was very, very challenging as a remote participant, because I was the only one. I was generally forgotten about, and there would be all these side conversations going on. I couldn't really understand anything because there'd be paper shuffling in front of the microphone. And so, we've already come so far with that, where I feel like now you have those remote participants, they're on the screen, but they can't always see who's talking, or they think they kind of can tell who's talking. But until you really have some of that camera technology implemented, where you can follow the speaker and really be able to get a good sense, and to be fair, at some point, maybe the meeting experience becomes better for that person than it is inside the room. And I think that'll be interesting to see how a lot of that a lot of that plays out in the time to come, because if there's one area where things are evolving very rapidly, it's absolutely in the field of AI, and I'll say not just in meeting rooms, but across many areas of the UCC stack, when you get into things like, chat and messaging, and even as you get into things like voice and contact center and all sorts of other areas within UCC, AI is absolutely, making little, maybe not large sweeping impacts in every area, but those small things that make a big difference in the user experience. So,
I'd like to
yeah,
add one thing to that
for
too.
sure.
Actually, I've been watching the AI smart framing of cameras for a while, and they just keep getting better and better, and trying to put the best face forward, as many of the vendors call it. So I've seen that coming up. But another aspect of AI that I think I would love to see from a UCC experience is on the side of developing executive summaries, about like usage statistics and analytics and things like that. If AI can, help with, putting together that data quickly, there's already so many dashboards available on many of the platforms, for us already. But if there was, a way that we could get more meaningful information out of it that AI can do for us, I think that would be a great way to, help speed up that kind of process as well.
Yeah, and to add to that, you actually brought up, kind of triggered another thought in my head that I didn't even remember is, the virtual assistant type AI where you've double booked, you can have your, I think one of them's Otter AI can join the meeting for you and kind of get it transcript and record. It would be, I think that's going to be very powerful in the future too, is people having that technology almost as part of their package. And maybe AI can give you meeting notes, or maybe it already exists. But that would be great too, is to have
It
something
does
do a
actually,
meeting
and
for you. So
depending on the platform, it's either part of the licensing or sometimes it's different licensing. But I mean, pretty much any ability to take data and analyze it, manipulate it, anything like that on a very rapid scale is where it's challenging for a human to spend the time doing that, but an AI assistant, co-pilot, whatever they're called, depending on the platform, that's the kind of things that they can really be helpful with. And I know a lot of people refer to AI as like an intern, because it is kind of like, it's kind of that busy work that, you may not want to do, but it's super critical. And yeah, when it can help drive insights, I think is when it becomes really valuable. And, that's obviously lots of different concerns around how that gets implemented within an organization, from security and everything there. But again, it's definitely something that we'll continue to see more rapid developments on as we move forward, for sure. So I wanted to ask a question about events, and again, some of this was kind of covered on the last panel that Paul was on, but we've seen a lot of in-person events return over the last few years, but virtual events is another area where they have changed in a good way, I will say. When I feel like several years ago, virtual events were difficult, right? They were challenging to attend. As an attendee, you never really felt like you were getting as much out of them. But are you hosting any of these virtual events? Have you been part of any of these virtual events? And how are you seeing technology help drive engagement within these events, if you're part of those at all?
Yeah, so at WTW, we have a lot of those. We have the all hands town halls. I know that our marketing team, holds events for their clients as well, for WTW's clients. I think things like, the polls and things like that to keep engagement up are a big part of it. I'm actually a co-chair for a segment at our work called Women in Technology, or WIT, which is part of Tech Inc. It's like an inclusion and diversity group that was homegrown within our company. And we have monthly meetings to, just give everybody a place to come in, a safe place to speak, and kind of share their knowledge and what they've learned. And one thing that I've learned about about engagement is to use the polls like word clouds or, you know, quizzes and things like that. Like we used that recently for women and for International Women's Day event, which was great. Engagement was really high. So just using some of those tools that are available in the platforms to make sure that the, you know, your audience is actually engaged and interfacing and not, you know, multitasking is a great way to do that. So something that actually gets feedback from your listeners is probably one of the best ways to ensure they stay engaged. And you know, we're primarily a Microsoft shop, so you know, we use Microsoft Live events, which will eventually become town halls and webinars for the smaller ones. But you know, with that, we have access to those type of polls. So that's what I would say is one of the strongest ways to keep everyone engaged.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not as experienced on the, you know, the software side, but you know, definitely on the hardware side, the better we can get as far as audio and video, you know, when people are asking questions, switching to that user, getting a good view of them, you know, will all help engagement instead of, you know, being on the far side, maybe hearing somebody ask a question and not recognizing the voice. You know, that can get you uninterested quick. So I think that just making the technology get to the place that being in a virtual event and hearing everybody in it is going to be the future.
Yeah, and I think that's a great word you've mentioned there, Paul, engagement, because I think, you know, a lot of times we sit here and we talk about meeting equity or equality or some of these terms that are thrown out there, and the reality is that it's not the same experience inside a room as it is, you know, joining a meeting remotely, and it won't be, and sometimes it's better one way, and sometimes it's better a different way. But I think the key here is that the meeting needs to be engaging for everybody that's participating in it. Otherwise, why are they even there, right? I mean, we've all heard the saying, the meeting that could have been an email, although I often say the meeting that could have been a chat. But it's so true that I think what we're really driving to in all these cases is engagement. Everybody's time is so valuable, and if we want them in the meeting, we want their full participation in the meeting. And I think we can even get to a greater place by, you know, the more people and the more diversity we can have within a meeting, the better. The better the conversation, the more interesting outcomes it have. But everybody really does need to feel like they have a seat at the table, if you will, whether their table is in the room or whether their table is, 1,000 miles away. The engagement piece of it is just so critical, and that's where I think we have a lot of value to add, and as experts in this industry, to be able to really drive that user experience. And I think a lot of people don't even know what they don't know in terms of what those experiences could be and how we can help take that sort of to the next level, for sure.
I agree. Yep. We also have a lot of hybrid type of events where there's an audience in the room and then there's, people on the remote end. So it's sometimes challenging to make sure that the remote audience is getting the same experience that the people in the room are. But I think that as technology advances and as the AI, the capabilities of the cameras improve as we go along, and being able to have the multi-camera setup in the room so that they can zoom into different people who are speaking within the room, not just the presenter, but the audience members as well. I think that as that progresses and becomes more strong, I think it'll help with that equality, that equity piece that you were mentioning before, so that everyone can get that face-to-face time, even in hybrid settings.
Yeah. So we've only got a couple of minutes, 2, 3, 4 minutes left, but outside of what we talked about, really for either of you, what other emerging trends or what other like topics and technologies do you feel like we're going to hear more about, in the next 6 to 12 months? And how should organizations be preparing to kind of deal with those accordingly? So any last thoughts in terms of anything that's really on the horizon that you feel like would be key to bring up at this point?
So one topic, and this could be a longer thought, but just kind of put that in everyone's heads, is as things are getting so nice at your desk, even if you come into the office, and the technology gets so good, company cultures around video conferencing should be something that people think about, because even here at an AV company, if we have, 6 of us here in a meeting, we're all sitting at our desks, taking the call when we're all actually in the office, so should company cultures in kind of leaders of companies kind of help people to, hey, if you're having a meeting here, maybe you should actually all go in the conference room instead of sit at your desk and then have to pay attention to the meeting, because we're going to get to the point where, yeah, it's going to be way easier to sit at your desk and participate in a group meeting, but does the company really want that? Is that really the best way to collaborate instead of all being in the room and sitting face to face if you can? I think that's a topic that I've already thought about for my teams here, is like, if we're all here, maybe we should actually go to the room and meet face to face instead of sitting on our computers and answering emails while we're in the meeting.
Otherwise, why don't we all come together, right?
Exactly.
How about
So
you, Sheila? Any last thoughts on?
I would just say that, things like the avatar feature that it's been around forever on, previous chatting platforms in the personal, consumer realm, but now it's starting to come into like Microsoft Teams, for example. I think that as people want to try to feel like they're present in a meeting, having the option to have like a moving avatar as opposed to just, initials in a circle is kind of helpful in helping you feel a little more involved. We'll probably see things like that emerge, evolve more, and Copilot will probably be another thing that we'll be keeping an eye on how it can help with, meetings, as we talked about earlier. So yeah, excited to see what comes out.
For sure. So we've just got a few seconds left. So how can people find more about you? Sheila, I'll let you start.
LinkedIn is the best spot.
Paul?
Agreed. LinkedIn for me, and I think we've got a way to see it if you scroll down in the.
I was just going to say that. So I wanted to thank you both for being part of this discussion, and thank you to the rAVe team for letting me host today. It's been fun talking to you both, and hopefully the rest of you found this interactive and enjoyable, and we'll look forward to seeing what's coming in the months to come.